Hello and welcome to Psychological Cybercrime. 3 questions to prevent social engineering attacks. We're going to cover a lot more than just 3 questions today. However, we wanted to boil it down to something that you can take action on at the end of the session and something you can take with you. As such, here are some of the quick takes that you're going to get from this session. And I thought I'd put a little note as an example to illustrate the problem that we're trying to solve, which is a study was done, and 48% of people will exchange their password for a piece of chocolate. So for those of you who have team members who love chocolate, take note, because 48% of them might exchange their password for a piece of chocolate. There is a reference study for instance, and we will provide those references later. Also, one of the other quick takes is that we wanted to have you think about social engineering like a security puzzle. And each piece of that puzzle is a piece of information that you do not want the bad actors or the social engineers to have. So think about that. We'll talk about that more a little bit later, but think about that as a security puzzle. Every piece matters. And finally, we're going to hit on the 3 questions to ask. Really ask yourself when you're in a situation to mitigate social engineering attacks. So those are the quick takes from today. But let's get a little bit deeper. Psychological cybercrime. Basically, we're talking about social engineering. So we're going to hit on what is social engineering and why is it so effective. It's targeting human nature. That's part of the problem, right? Different types of social engineering attacks. This isn't, I don't want to get too detailed on this as far as all the little idiosyncrasies and nuances. However, we will cover the different types of tactics that you can look out for relative to social engineering. And then we're going to hit on the 3 questions as promised to prevent social engineering attacks, as well as some other tips that you might be able to employ to help mitigate that, as well as what to do in case you feel like you might be a victim of social engineering. Then open it up for some questions at the end. But before we get going, I always like to spend 1 minute about MyTech, just 1 minute, I promise. MyTech is a business and technology consulting organization. We work with small and medium-sized organizations, and our goal is to help them implement a proven IT strategy that we know delivers consistent results for our clients. Ultimately, it removes IT challenges so that you can focus on the other serving your customers better and be more adaptable to other business challenges. When we work together with our clients, we help them achieve 4 times more volume productivity from their IT investments over time. So if you'd like to learn more about that and how we do it, raise your hand. We'd love to have a chat with you, but otherwise we know that's not why you're here today, so let's get going. All right, what is social engineering and why is it so effective? Okay, first of all, as I mentioned in the quick takes, is social engineering is like a security puzzle. The reason why I try to think of a visualization to help you think about what social engineers are trying to do. If you look at this image here on the screen and you think about each one of those pieces is a piece to the puzzle, and that every single one of them matters. If social engineers just need to get the whole puzzle, or even 50% or 70% of the puzzle in order to potentially launch an attack against you, each one of those pieces does matter, right? So sometimes a piece, like I think about one of these corner pieces. Now, a corner piece is always great when you're looking at a puzzle, but this one doesn't actually have any information on it. However, giving this piece of information allows them to maybe connect this piece or this piece, and this piece starts getting information. My point is that sometimes social engineering might ask for or seem like you're trying to acquire some innocuous piece of information, but that little piece of information might be just one of these pieces of the puzzle that might allow them to know and help them form to know how to get the next piece. Again, as I mentioned in the second bullet there, each piece makes it easier to gather the next piece in the puzzle if you're a social engineer. And oftentimes to get all of these, it's not like someone's going to try and pick up the phone and ask you all the questions to be able to get the 25 or 30 pieces that are in this puzzle. It's different vectors and different types of attacks, whether it be via email or phone or text or otherwise, might be employed in order to gather the individual pieces from which an attack might be launched. So that's one of the reasons why one of the perspectives I was hoping to help share today is that if you get it in your head that social engineering is like putting together a security puzzle that's basically how to attack your organization, each piece is valuable, and be conscious of even something that might seem innocuous could be helping the social engineer get that next piece of the puzzle. All right, so that's hopefully a high level understanding of at least like how can you visualize social engineering? But let's talk about, well, why is social engineering so effective? first of all, people by nature are social. We respond to emotion. For instance, and that's why individual decision making is highly influenced by others. If you've probably seen the video of someone using a baby crying noise in the background, calling up a representative and panicking, creating urgency and this problem, and the representative on the other end of the phone call is really inspired to help them because they're trying to help a mother who's struggling with a crying child and this other problem. And that person gets information. Again, we respond to that. We respond to authority. We respond to people that presume authority. So these are some of the challenges, is that we as human beings, we like to be fair. We like to be helpful in general. And so this is one of the reasons why social engineering is so effective and why it's so important to train your team on how to mitigate and recognize social engineering, because it's really the last line of defense to be able to potentially breach your environment. And again, one of the last things that social engineering, which is probably one of the key concepts, is that people are often overloaded and they look for shortcuts to save time. It's not to say that people are trying to be lazy. It's just that we all have a lot going on. And so imagine if some vendor came in to your front in your reception area, and that person was busy with several other aspects or requests. Maybe that person doesn't take the time to do the due diligence to vet that person that they're really supposed to be there and they have the authority that they say they do. So it's just easy that we'll see, and one of the examples we'll provide later, and how these attacks are often implemented, is that the attacker presumes that you are not going to take the time to go through the due diligence that you need to try and mitigate a social engineering attack. So that's one of the key pieces to keep in mind. And when you put all these together, that's why social engineering is really so effective. Because candidly, social engineers are preying on the kindness of human nature in general. And that's a little bit of a reference there, by the way, is a study in an article written by Microsoft. We'll share this information as a follow-up too, but this has more information there that might be you might be interested in. And one of my favorites. So I attended, if you don't know who Kevin Mitnick is, that's okay. When I first heard him present, I didn't know who he was either. Actually, I believe it was a Dell conference I went to several years ago. Kevin Mitnick was one of the almost original phone system hackers. He hacked the telecoms and to be able to do free long distance calling and get other information. So he was pretty famous from the fact that, he was a hacker, he got caught, went to jail, prison, whatever, got out, and now he's a security consultant, right? That seems to be the path that a lot of them take, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so I heard him present. And so Kevin Mitnick now gets, as part of his organization, what he does as a consultant, he gets hired to test the security of different organizations. So that's his job. That's what he does now. And so he was telling some stories about how he's done that in the past. And one of the things that he mentioned is that that just blew me away, he said, when I am allowed to use social engineering as one of the methods to compromise an organization, I have a 100% success rate. And so that's how effective social engineering is, that and now an ethical hacker, I sure hope anyway, who gets paid to test security of organizations, he said whenever social engineering is allowed to be used, he has a 100% success rate. So that's how serious this problem is that we're trying to solve and help you address. So now with that understanding, a little bit of what social engineering is and why it's effective, and why it's important for us to pay attention to and do something about it, let's talk about some of the different types of social engineering attacks so that you can be better prepared and better prepare your team to be able to mitigate them, recognize and mitigate them. All right. So I'm going to go into each one of these in a little bit of detail because the summary doesn't always just do it all the justice. But a quick summary: spear phishing or phishing is typically employed via email. Or maybe by linking to a malicious website, like, for example, a fake Office 365 authentication page, or just an email that asks for information to reply, or your bank, something like that, right? So that's the one type of social engineering attack is spear phishing or phishing. Phishing, again, I'm not the one that came up with these acronyms. I actually have some reference articles of different organizations that they try and summarize this and categorize this. So I'm trying to use the industry vernacular that would help your team speak about these and be able to acknowledge the differences. So phishing is basically when you use phone calls or voice messages as tactics to be able to get someone to take action. And some of these are oftentimes employed in combination, and I'll explain that here in a minute. Smishing, I guess using SMS or text messages. I'm sure I know I've gotten them. So you've probably received text messages in the past that just look fraudulent. Oh, hey, here's this link, or hey, our bank is sending in a piece of information, or you've got an award. You just have to click here to acknowledge. I got one the other day. I was actually going to be attending a concert a couple weeks ago, and I got one that looked like maybe it was the concert people contacting me. I don't know if they knew I was going to that concert or not, but I ignored it. I don't know if it was legit or not, candidly, but we all get those. I imagine we all get text messages or SMS messages that they're really trying to elicit information from us. Another one called baiting or quid pro quo. It's enticing with a free item. Like, for example, the people giving up their password for a piece of chocolate. That's an example of baiting. Or quid pro quo is like if you download this piece, I'll give you this, here's the problem. If you download this piece of software, it'll solve the problem. So it's kind of like getting them to do something because you're trying to help them solve a problem or give them some free piece of information or item. Pretexting. This is one of the ones that is could happen over the phone. Again, this example could be used in combination with phishing, but it also can be used in person. Is oftentimes can be a physical attack, meaning that someone shows up at your office, pretends to be someone that they're not, maybe from the phone company or the internet provider or your IT provider. For instance, if someone showed up at your office and you're a MyTech client, and if you haven't verified that they have a MyTech badge and that they're supposed to be there, you might just let them into your office. And so that's one of the things to prevent against or be on the lookout for is impersonating a trusted organization for your company. Reverse engineering. Presenting a problem for which the attacker has the solution. I don't know about you, but I've gotten a combination of phishing and reverse engineering. I remember someone calling me on my cell phone saying, oh, we've noticed that you have a threat on your laptop or on your computer, and you need to go to this website to download this to solve that problem. And I remember having some fun with that conversation because not knowing who they were, not expecting the phone call, and knowing that we're in IT, how might they have known that there was something wrong with my computer and they happen to connect my computer with my cell phone when I've never given them that information? So anyway, that's an example of where they might use a phone call or a voice message to reverse engineer a problem for a problem for which they have a solution. Finally, tailgating, and there's more, by the way. These are kind of the high-level ones that are a combination of digital as well as physical. Physical if you have a key card access system or some physical security in your building or in your office. Allowing someone that may or may not be authorized to go behind you is called tailgating. Maybe they would pretend to have a whole bunch of stuff in their hands, like I can't open the door. Could you please help me? And they let you go through, not knowing whether or not. I mean, again, they use social engineering and human nature against you in those regard to attack and use all these different tactics. So those are the different types. And then here's some of the tactics that are employed. And these get employed, again, some of these are digital or virtual or physical, and sometimes it's a combination of all the above. As I mentioned, thinking about that security puzzle. Each instance or each method might be employed to try and get a piece of that puzzle so that collectively they could put together the puzzle that will allow them to do an successful exploit on your organization. So here's some of the common tactics and goals that social engineering has relative to targeting your team. Social engineering tries to use the sense of authority. Again, this speaks to some of the reasons why social engineering is effective is because people or in positions of authority and roles of authority oftentimes influence people's decisions. If you're as a CEO or CFO or some executive of an organization, if you're from some official organization like the utility company, et cetera, or your phone company, internet company, some vendor that you work with, using authority to get people to maybe share information or give access when they wouldn't have in some other circumstance. Urgency is another tactic that is commonly employed. Again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key takeaways that people try and do is, even if you have policies or procedures in place, if someone doesn't, they prey on some sense of urgency or some sense of not taking the time to think through it or ask the 3 questions that we're going to share here in a little bit that will help you mitigate against social engineering attacks, is presenting some sense of urgency. Also, maybe a tactic of secrecy or confidentiality. For instance, I'll show you an example of a social engineering phishing attempt that came up in one of our previous sessions that we did just on phishing. We did a whole nother session on phishing, and we'll post that link in the chat here in a little bit on the next slide. But is presuming confidentiality, saying, hey, don't tell anyone about this. I have a request that I'm just asking you about. So it makes the person not raise their hand or not question it or not double check and make sure that it's something that's authorized and approved and the right person asking the information. Current events, sometimes social engineering tactics and goals, they will take leveraging a current event like Hurricane Ida that hit New Orleans in Louisiana that's going on right now. There might be charity events or charity fund requests, things like that, where people might try and get you to take action because you want to donate to relief efforts, things like that. They'll try and take advantage of some current event that makes it seem more legit, might lend the request some additional credibility, where in the past maybe that was something that you wouldn't have fallen victim to or subject to. And then, common situations. So for instance, one of the other tactics that we saw, I'm not showing this example, but we've seen in the past where, it's very common for people to receive a package. I mean, how many people have increased the number of packages they've had delivered to their door in the last year and a half in particular? Well, that's a common problem. And so one of the tactics that we saw employed is impersonating. So this is also using one of the tactics previously talked about, but impersonating the pretexting, impersonating the postal service and saying, hey, you have a package that I couldn't deliver for whatever reason. Please click here and give us the information you need or the information we need to deliver it. That was actually a successfully employed one based on someone in our circle where we saw that where they leverage a common situation that a lot of people receive packages. And if you're expecting a package, you might be more apt to click on that link and provide information because you were expecting something. Now, they might not have known that you were expecting anything, but it's just something that social engineering tactics will use is what are common occurrences in the general population that might increase the probability of someone acting when in the past they might not have. So those are some of the common tactics. Again, those get deployed or employed across all of the different types of attacks, whether again be phishing, smishing, the baiting, all the above. All these tactics get used in combination in order to elicit information from you. And the goals of social engineering using all those tactics is to try and get you to act without thinking or without doing your due diligence, and to get information either for the exploit at the moment, like getting your password, or maybe getting a piece of information like who's the executive assistant, who is the person the CEO is most likely to contact to be able to give financial information, who's the accounting person or the CFO or the controller of the organization. Getting all that information might only be a phone call one time to get that information, and then they use that information to take the next step in their attack or put another piece of the puzzle together. So that's basically what social engineering is trying to do. So here's an example. This is a phishing example that was a legitimate one that worked actually for our organization. Again, these are things that we always are trying to improve on, but it actually worked. So someone had found the executive assistant of our or one of the reception folks of our organization that answered the phones and worked with the CEO, and so they emailed this person from the CEO's name. However, the email address was not that of our CEO. But they said, hey, I need your cell number. I have a personal request for you. So basically trying to get authority by using the CEO and saying, I have a personal request, like again, suggesting secrecy or confidentiality, and for you now, so creating a sense of urgency. And so this person is actually new to our organization. It's relatively new to our organization. We probably should have done some better. We should have done some better training to help them recognize this, but this helped them do that. And they actually ended up ordering some gift cards and sending that off to them. It's a common attack that gets used. But this is just an example. It's a phishing email that leveraged social engineering and authority, as well as secrecy and confidentiality, as well as a sense of urgency, and then took it offline to a cell phone. So it used some of the phishing and vishing together. So, as well as the pretexting by using authority. So this is an example where, again, sharing these types of things, and we did a whole session on this where we gave multiple different examples of what phishing looks like and how to recognize it. But this is an example where multiple tactics get employed to be able to exploit your organization or attack your organization. All right, so now that we've talked about how, what is the kind of phishing, what are the different types of attacks, what are the tactics they use and the goals of social engineering, okay, what can we do about it, right? We understand the problem we're trying to solve now, at least hopefully a little bit better than we did when we first started this session, but now what can we do to actually mitigate these risks? All right, so I'm gonna hit it on the head right away. 3 questions to prevent social engineering attacks. And what I mean by this is if you're someone that might be receiving phone calls, or you're someone that might be at the front desk, or you're someone that in the financial department in particular, there's certain people in your organization that are more apt to be subject or to be targeted for these. We're going to get into that a little next. However, it's just I'm thinking of those people right now. I'm thinking of those folks, and these are things to ask yourself and to teach your team to ask yourself. And just literally, you could almost print this out, put it on a Post-it note, or put it on their computer and say, look, if you're not sure, here are questions you should ask yourself. Was this request unsolicited? Well, is this vendor supposed to be stopping by today? Are they supposed to, is there a problem with their internet connection where they need access to the server room? If any of you use multi-factor authentication, like on your phone, and an approval request comes up to say, yes, do you want to approve this request? If you didn't try and log into one of your systems, please don't approve that request. That is an unsolicited request. That might be an example of someone might be trying to log into your system and an authentication request is going to your phone. If you didn't initiate it, or if it's unsolicited, don't approve it. So think about any of these requests, phone calls that you might be getting from your bank, vendors stopping by your physical office, requests, pop-ups that might come on your phone. Were these requests solicited? Did you expect them? So that's one of the things, one of the initial questions you can ask yourself. If it's unsolicited, it's probably suspicious, and it's probably something that you shouldn't allow to happen. Secondly, can you verify the authority of the requester or source? And I know this is kind of weirdly worded, but I said the reason why I use the words verify is because if someone comes to your office and they flash a badge, hey, I'm with the utility company, please let me back into your server closet, or hey, I'm with your IT support company, let me get access to your server room. Can you verify the authority? Now, again, use these in combination. So for instance, let's say one of the MyTech support folks comes to your physical office to do something. Were you expecting them? If you were, great. Then did you verify who they are? Do they have a MyTech badge, right? They should have a MyTech badge. But if you didn't expect them and they have a MyTech badge, well, maybe calling MyTech to verify that that person is who they say they are and is supposed to be there is a way to verify the authority of the requester or the source that's coming at you. This applies to websites, links and emails. Can you verify the identity? A lot of times, things that are trying to fool you, they'll use a similar name or they'll use a similar, but maybe a character's changed. So can you verify the authority of the requester or source? And when an email, we have seen this happen before, where you're having some correspondence via email from an email by someone who's taken over maybe like a CFO's email or something like that, and they're trying to get you to take action, and they put contact information in the email. If you're trying to verify the authenticity and the authority of the CFO that's corresponding with you, don't use the contact information that's in the email that they've sent you. Look up the company separately and contact them using not the information provided, some other third-party validated information to call and verify. We've actually had this happen, not at MyTech, but one of our clients that we know of, where they used the information provided in the fraudulent email to call and verify that the person was who they said they were. Well, of course they said yes, but that wasn't really truly verifying the authority of the requester or the source. So that's a question you can ask yourself. Can you actually verify who this person is, or this requester or this source is? Finally, even if they were solicited, they were expected to be there, and even if you have verified their authority, do they really need the information that they're asking? Now, this also applies if they're just asking for information like, hey, your bank's never going to ask you for your password. Of course, the requester source doesn't need that information at that point. But these are just examples of where if you ask yourself, does the requester or the source need this information? And maybe you end up verifying the authority before you release that information, again, because you might just be releasing it and it might seem innocuous, right? It might be that little corner piece of the puzzle that doesn't really have any information in it, but yet it helps that person, the social engineer, take that next step and find that next puzzle piece. So basically, we boiled this down. I was working with our security assessor and one of our security experts here and internally, as well as just some of the research and the references that we're going to provide here that we've sourced already that we're going to provide, is if you ask yourself these 3 questions for any type of suspicious or interesting problem or challenge you're trying to deal with from a social, it could be social engineering, it will take you a long way to mitigating the request. And the last point that I think is, as we like to say, it's the overall overarching metadata or the piece of information that's really important here is that what social engineers try and do is get you to act without taking the time to ask yourself these 3 questions. That's one of the fundamental problems, is that they prey on your inability to take the time to do these things, even if it's an inconvenience, because people don't like to be inconvenienced, and people don't like to inconvenience others in general, and so social engineers will prey on that. So please make sure and train your team to take the time to do these. Ask yourself these 3 questions. All right, so a couple additional tips. As I mentioned earlier, try and identify the people on your team that are likely to be targeted. People in the financial department, maybe your executive assistant or assistants, maybe your front desk folks, and their alternates, right? Like, who covers for these people when they're out on lunch, because they might be easier targets than the primary people. So if you can identify who those people in your organization that are more likely to be targeted, and I'm not saying you shouldn't train the rest of your team, but identify the folks on your team that are more likely to be targeted. That's one of the steps. Also, one of the things you can do, you could hire someone to do this, because there are people like Kevin Mitnick who get paid to attack and see if they can breach your security. But one of the things you can do is think like a social engineer. If I'm trying to go to your physical space, like walk into your front door and pretend that you are trying to impersonate someone or pretend that you are trying to get information, can you see information that's readily available in the physical space that might allow you to social engineer your own company? Just take a third-party perspective on that, and then use that information to define policies and expectations. How do you want your team to handle this? For instance, maybe you have a loading dock, or maybe you commonly have people delivering, shipping people delivering. Well, do you let them be alone in your inventory room where you've got lots of other things secured, or do they only unload in this section? Do they need to be attended or not? What are the expectations? What is the policy you want to employ to mitigate against some of these security tactics? What is something someone do when either guests, when your employees or team members or guests, vendors, et cetera, might come into your front desk? What level of scrutiny do you apply to them? Well, if you define what you expect, then the person at the front desk, in this example, can use the policy to basically say, look, this is what I've been instructed to do, and this is what I have to do in order to make sure that I don't get in trouble. So make the policy the bad actor, make the policy the culprit, not the individual, right? So the individual can fall back on the policy, but defining what you want them to do versus just letting them make it up, or whomever might be sitting there make it up, is a key part of helping you mitigate this. And then train them. So once you define all those things, train the team on it and train their alternates in particular. Not that you shouldn't train your whole team, but in particular, train those people that are likely to be targeted and those folks that might sit in for them whenever they're out on PTO or lunch break or something like that. All right, so those are some of the tips. And then finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, look, if you think you are a victim of social engineering, report it to the people in your organization. Don't keep it quiet. Social engineers would love for you to keep it quiet, so don't do that. It's okay. I hope your organization would recognize that, look, people make mistakes. Social engineering works because it's effective using all these tactics. So if you think you've been victim of it, report it. Make some noise. If you think, personally or professionally, if financial information may have been compromised, call your financial institution or go visit them. Make sure to alert them so that you can avoid potential dollars being leaked out of your account or any compromise to your actual accounting information or banking information. If you've provided a password, change your password. And I don't want to just say like maybe you provided it for this site, but if you use that password on other sites, change it on all of those other sites too, and do not use that password again. And use like a password vault or something like that, or which we've done a session on password vaults too. So use a password vault to be able to keep strong, unique passwords across all your different sites. And potentially, depending on the nature of the attack or the nature of the potential, the thing that you might feel you're a victim of, contact the police or contact the authorities to make them aware of what's happened. So those are the things that we'd recommend. If you think you're a victim, if you're working trying to mitigate the impacts of social engineering. So with that said, look, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Please follow us on LinkedIn or subscribe to our YouTube channel. We always post this information there, and we like to share this content to help you keep yourself safe and secure. If you feel like anyone that you know can benefit from this information, if they've been a victim of social engineering, or if you're trying to use this maybe to onboard your team, this is some information. Share that with your team or those that you think can benefit. Join us for future events. We do them every other week. So mytech.com/events. And we also have every other month. We just did our Power User Group session last week, so our next one's in October. But if you have those more technically savvy folks in your organization, join us for those Power User Group sessions. We'd love to have you. And I'd like to leave you with one parting thought, is that social engineering is not always used for bad. One of the studies had noted in one of the references that I provided earlier, I said, 48% of people will provide their password in exchange for chocolate. Well, and that's in similar information. It said that, if you ever go out to a restaurant and they provide you a mint when you're paying your tab, there's studies that show that there's a potential increase of 18 to 21% better tip because they provided you a mint. Guess what? That's social engineering too. So it doesn't always have to be bad. But social engineering is effective, and hopefully this session has helped you find some ways in which you can protect yourself and mitigate against those risks. So thank you everyone for attending or for watching, and let's close down now for the session, and let's open it up for questions. Thank you. Stephanie?
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. There are no current questions right now.
No worries. I kind of assumed that this session would probably not have a ton of questions, but I'll just provide one last summary. This stuff works. The social engineers prey on human nature. They prey on the good nature of your people and your team, and they employ a combination of those tactics. And so again, I'll leave you with the security puzzle. Just think about, even if information might seem innocuous, might seem like not important, it could be one piece of the puzzle that helps that social engineer get the next piece of the puzzle that allows them to maybe target your organization with greater credibility and greater success. So keep your due diligence up, take the time to ask yourself those 3 questions, and together we'll help mitigate against a successful social engineering attacks. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll sign off for today.